buy Governor McCulloch's book. It is a short but fascinating read about the complexity of trying to manage and get different parts of government to work together. You know, you got the local police in Charlottesville, you got the police at the University of Virginia, you got the state police, you got the president of the University of Virginia, you got the mayor of Charlottesville, all these people trying to come together. He tells you the challenges of how to make it all work together. Second thing you want to know about the governor, in addition to what's in your program, is that he is a graduate of the Catholic University of America. He has a law degree from Georgetown, and he's only done one case of law in his entire career. That's because he is an entrepreneur. He started his first business when he was 14 years old, and he went on to many successful businesses before he turned his interest to politics. You know about his leadership of the Democratic National Committee. You know about his service as governor of Virginia. He is going to be interviewed tonight by our own Philadelphia award-winning journalist, Tracey Matisak. So ladies and gentlemen, let's give a wonderful Philadelphia welcome to Governor Terry McAuliffe.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us. Governor McAuliffe, thank you so much for coming to Philadelphia.
Great to be in Philadelphia, city of brotherly love.
Yeah.
And thanks for coming out in the rain. I appreciate it.
Well, we want to certainly get to your book, Beyond Charlottesville, but Governor, before we even get into the book, we have to talk about the events of this past weekend, particularly the massacre that took place in El Paso. Of course, there was another shooting in Dayton, 9 people killed there. What were your thoughts as you watched all of this unfold this weekend, days after your book came out?
Well, to have a book out right now, you know, taking a stand against white nationalism, and then to see what happened in El Paso, and I'm sure you've all seen in the manifesto what this gentleman had written. It basically told the law enforcement that he wanted to kill all Mexicans. That's what he told the police yesterday when he was being interrogated. He quoted Trump a lot in the manifesto, but, you know, no one should be surprised. What I went through in Charlottesville, where I've never in my life seen 1,000 people, white nationalists and neo-Nazis. And to think about these neo-Nazis walking down the street with swastikas and shirts with Adolf Hitler's picture on it. My father fought in World War II. I have a son today who's the United States Captain of the Marine Corps fighting over against ISIS. People have worn the cloth of our country to stop this type of extremism and to see it on our city streets. And I'll tell you, I still, when I think about it, these 1,000 people screaming the most vile things I have ever heard. Every other word was the F and N word. Every woman was called the F and C word. Standing in front of the synagogue, they're screaming that we are going to burn you and burn that synagogue like we did in Auschwitz. You just, folks, don't understand how somebody in this day and age, people used to wear hoods, and they used to do it at night. They don't think they have to do that anymore. And we'll get into it, but you know, I talked to the president that day. I had known Donald Trump for 25 years. I was the governor, and of course the president calls the governor of a state during a crisis. And he called me at about noon, and I had explained to him who was in our state. They had come from 35 states, spewing vile language. And we had a good idea what was going to happen. I had, through my folks, my state police infusion center, I want to be careful what I say, but we had had our state police do undercover work. I'll leave it at that. We had the FBI, DHS doing work for 2 months. These folks were told to bring weapons and to do harm. So we knew ahead of time what the intent. They wanted to come and raise holy hell in Virginia. And supposedly it was about the statues. Folks, half these people didn't even know who Robert E. Lee was. Honestly, this was a call to action to spew their hatred. And I don't say this lightly, and I told the president on the phone that day, your hate language, you're creating divisions in our country that people feel emboldened that they could do this. This gentleman from El Paso cited the language of the President of the United States for the reason he did what he did. And so the book goes through all the lead up to it. I talk about where do we go from here as a nation. I think you'll find it a very powerful book. I think you'll find it fascinating, the lead up to where we are. Virginia has a tough history on race relations, I'll be honest with you. And as a New Yorker running for governor, I dealt with a lot of chances. I do want to thank one person in particular who's here with me tonight, who headed up a lot of my security operations, public safety operations, and you stole him from me, is your fire commissioner here, Adam Teal, and I want to thank Adam for the great work that he has done.
So, Governor, you mentioned the president's rhetoric, and there has been a lot of talk over the last several days about whether his rhetoric has encouraged people like the shooter in El Paso and others. And in the book, you came out swinging. You said in the introduction, this is before the first chapter, you said, and I quote, "Donald Trump chose that day," referring to August 12th, 2017, "to come out as a white supremacist. He chose that day to come out as a dyed-in-the-wool, unapologetic racist. It was his coming out party that day. No more room for any doubt that this man was, at heart, a racist and a hater." Very, very strong words.
And I don't say it lightly. As I say, I had known the president. In full disclosure, when I ran for governor, he'd given me $25,000. When I knew him, he was a Democrat. He was pro-choice, pro-gay rights. He'd give money. He was a big donor to the Democratic National Committee. But he decided at some point in his life that he could not win the Democratic nomination for president. I tell a story in the book. I'm having dinner with him, and he's saying, "I may run for president." I said, "Which party are you going to run for?" He says, "I don't know yet. I'll figure that out." I mean, Trump is not a Republican. Trump is Trump. It's about him. But listen, when he started running for president, but his whole history, I mean, let's be clear, in the 70s, when he was a landlord with his father, he was sued by the Nixon Justice Department. I mean, how hard is that, to get sued by the Nixon Justice Department because they would not rent to blacks? And so the Justice Department set him up. They'd send a white couple in, a black couple in. Black couple went in. "No, we don't have any places to rent." White couple would go in the next day. "Take your pick. We got hundreds of places." When he used to go to Trump Castle, which was his place out here in New Jersey, when he walked in, all blacks had to get off the floor. This is all well documented. When he ran for president, he said, "I want to ban all Muslims from America." Really? That's what he said. He called Mexicans rapists and murderers. So, and when he ran for president, he retweeted white supremacist tweets and neo-Nazi tweets. So there was a long history there. I'm just shocked at like what he has done recently, how he has continued this. But anyway, so when I told the president what was going on and he needed to come out and show leadership and stop, and the world was watching what is going on in Charlottesville, Virginia. They're seeing this on TV. They're seeing the swastikas. They're seeing the fights going on. We had to send a message. And I said to the president, I said, you know, Barack Obama had Charleston, George Bush had 9/11, Bill Clinton had Oklahoma City. There are times in your presidency, there is going to be a time when you have to stand up and be the moral leader. The world is looking at you, and America is clearly looking. And so we had a long conversation, and I said, you know, and you got to stop this hate rhetoric. It's hurting America, it's hurting Virginia, it's hurting my economy. I mean, we had so many ICE raids in Virginia, everybody was driven underground. It was really, people were scared to death. And then he talked about the economy for 10 minutes, whatever. But when I hung up, I felt he was going to do the right thing. Well, I mean, yeah, foolish me. But I said, you go first, Mr. President. Of course, I'll do my press conference after yours. And he said, okay, I'm going to go out in a few minutes. He was up here in New Jersey at his golf course. And half an hour went by, an hour went by, an hour and a half went by, 2 hours went by, 2.5 hours went by. I didn't know what's going on. I'm waiting. And I know what happened. Bannon or Miller or one of the folks inside the White House came out and said, no, Mr. President, no. You are not going to attack neo-Nazis or white supremacists. You're not. And he came out, as you all know, and gave that horrible speech. And he said, many sides, many sides. There were good people on both sides. Folks, there were not good people with their swastikas. Heather Heyer was a 32-year-old woman there to protest against hatred. She was killed that day. This guy, James Fields, weaponized his car and ran down the streets of Charlottesville, 35 people injured, and she was killed that day. And I lost my state police helicopter with my pilot, and a former member of my security detail were killed that day. And there were not good people on the other side. There weren't. And he couldn't bring himself to say neo-Nazi and white supremacist. He did it today. Finally, he came out today and used white supremacists are bad and awful and all that. Didn't say anything about neo-Nazis, but it's too little too late.
Yeah. Governor, in thinking about that day, August 12th, 2017, and what you just mentioned, the losses of that day, Heather Heyer killed, 2 state troopers who were very close to you and your family killed when their chopper went down, all of the mayhem, and I'm just wondering if you can take us back to that day and give us a sense of how you were able to process in real time the losses that were mounting, even as you were preparing to give a press conference and sort of brief everyone on what was going on. You had the president's remarks, you had all of these things happening at the same time, and your own personal losses that you suffered that day. Can you talk about that and sort of how you navigated all of that?
So as I say, we prepared. On Friday morning, I had the last meeting in my office with my colonel of the state police, Colonel Flaherty, and I shipped down about 979 state police. I called out the National Guard secretly because if the word got out on Friday that the governor was calling the National Guard out, everybody, this was going to be like Woodstock and Berkeley all rolled into one. Everybody would have wanted to be there. So I called out the Guard. The first time in 50 years the Guard had been called out for a domestic situation. I secretly, as you can secretly move 300 National Guard trucks down Route 29 in Charlottesville. In fact, the Washington Post got tipped off, and they called my office and said, has the governor declared a state emergency? Is he moving the National Guard? Luckily, General Williams, the head of my guard, said, well, we could tell her, which is true, we have a training exercise going on. And they did say we had a training. And so I met with everybody in my office. If you got everything you need, Colonel, you got everything you need, General, great, go do your jobs. I, of course, was not going to be there. The last thing you want is the governor of the state in the command center giving orders, as Adam can tell you. You hire very good people, and, the governor's not the chief law enforcement officer, and knowing my personality, I would have walked right out in the park within 5 minutes, and the police would have been trying to protect me instead of doing their job. So obviously the decision was to keep me away. I was in Northern Virginia, and I got in about 7 o'clock at night. I talked to Brian Moran, who's in the book a lot. He was my Secretary of Public Safety, my main conduit that day. And then about 9 o'clock, he gave me a call. He said, you're not going to believe what's going on here at the University of Virginia. Unbeknownst to anybody, hundreds and hundreds of these folks who were the rally was scheduled for noon the next day. Friday night, there's a mountain next to the University of Virginia, and they started at the top of the mountain, hundreds and hundreds. And they all lit torches. And they slowly, it was so eerie, because there's no lights on the mountain, you had this long snake of folks with torches screaming, Jews, you will not replace us. Blood and soil, all the chants from 1933 and 1934 Nazi Germany. And you could hear it echoing as they're coming down the mountain. And then they came on, you don't call the University of Virginia campus. You learn that when you run for governor. It's the grounds. Thomas Jefferson built the grounds. Just if you want to run for office, that would be a huge political mistake. They came on to the grounds of the University of Virginia and circled the Thomas Jefferson statue and started throwing the torches at people. It was mayhem. I was concerned because the University of Virginia had inkling, and the Charlottesville police had inkling that this might happen, never told us at the state. I was very angry about that. You're not allowed to go on the University of Virginia, or most universities, with lighted torches. They should never have been allowed to come on campus. But that was the first indicator that, boy, we are in for quite a weekend. And then the next morning, about 6:30, Brian and I start communicating, every few minutes. Pretty quiet, 6:30 to 8. And then about 8, he calls me and says, Governor, look at your phone. I'm sending you a bunch of pictures. And all of these pictures were of all of these militia. And they were full, Virginia's an open carry state. All of them with semi-automatic rifles, every one of them, with revolvers strapped to each leg, all the camo gear on. And I said to Brian, I said, are these our police? He said, I don't know who they are. I said, well, go ask him who they are. And he kept the phone on, and he went over to the first guy and said, who are you? All of them marching in military style with all of these weapons. And he said, oh, you can't talk to me, you got to talk to my commanding officer. I said, Brian, you get up there and talk to his commanding officer. And the guy says, we are here to protect the First Amendment. Okay, we're here, we don't like the white nationalists, we don't like the neo-Nazis, we don't like the other side. We're here to make sure that there's peace. So all of a sudden, you've got a couple hundred people who think they're their own police and army. Yeah. Now this has been added. And then the fist fights started breaking out. Now CNN kept running the same fight over and over. If you were sitting at home in Philadelphia, you would have thought it was total mayhem. But, 9 to 10, there were some. And see, we work, folks, for the city of Charlottesville. Same thing probably here. If Philadelphia has an incident, the Philadelphia police are in charge, right? Same thing in Charlottesville. So we, the state, even though I had a majority of the law enforcement, we worked for the city. We had to take our orders from the city, which I didn't like, but whatever. That's what, unified command is all about. I was never good at that. And then about 10 o'clock, things started to get out of control, and the city of Charlottesville had an agreement with the white nationalists and the neo-Nazis that they would come in one entrance into the park. Well, guess what? They didn't honor that commitment. They came in from every street. And literally within a half hour, it was total bedlam. Yeah. So you had 1,000 neo-Nazis, white supremacists, 2,000 counter-protesters, all coming into this park. Not lying, the park is about a little bigger than this room. There is no way you can put 3,000 people in this room. Yeah. And this was another problem I had. I had told the city they've got to move the park. It can't be held there. We cannot keep people safe. And the city finally, Wednesday night, filed a permit application to move it to McIntyre Park. Yeah. Huge place. The key to controlling a protest is to keep both sides separated. There's no way you could keep them 3,000 people separated in a room like this. Yeah. And they filed the suit. And I'm very tough on the ACLU in the book. I love the ACLU. But they filed suit against the city for trying to move it. Yeah. And 9 o'clock on Friday night, a judge sided with the white supremacists and the neo-Nazis and kept the location in that park.
Well, I want to stop you there, Governor, because I want to ask you about that. There was considerable criticism after the fact about all of the mayhem and sort of the way that everything was handled from a law enforcement point of view. And you write at great length about the sort of disconnect that you felt that there was between the state government and the city of Charlottesville, which was, as you pointed out, the lead agency. There are those who have read your book who have accused you of passing the blame, of shifting the blame and saying, blaming everybody else but not the state for this. How do you respond to those criticisms?
Well, first of all, the book's not about blame. It's about racism. But there are some very key points that I talk about. One, when the permit was applied for, you have the right to deny a permit, a city. You have the right to limit a permit. They never should have granted the permit to Emancipation Park. It was just too small. They should have banned poles, sticks, masks. So under Charlottesville law, when you file a permit, if you take no action, it's automatically granted in 10 days. The city took no action. Yeah. So the permit was granted in this small park with that's the only real criticism I say of the city. So fast forward a month later, they filed a petition at a state facility. I banned poles, masks, sticks. I said, you can't do it in this facility. This roundabout, the permit said you could have 5,000 people. You could have 5,000 people if you stack them 50 bodies on top of each other. I mean, common sense things. But, the book is not, I'm not trying to blame or put blame. Mm-hmm. I am mad at the ACLU. And in fact, many of the leadership, the Jewish members of the ACLU quit and said, we love the First Amendment, but we are not here to protect neo-Nazis. If law enforcement says we cannot keep you safe, we cannot physically do it, that should trump First Amendment about keeping it in the same park. We're not denying, we're just trying to move you to where we can keep it safe. And that, that's problematic.
What would you say would be the key lessons learned from the way that things played out that day?
Well, we changed what you call unified command in Virginia. No longer, if the state is committing all the resources, we're not going to work for the city. Yeah. We're going to take, if you're bringing down a majority of the folks. So at about 11:15, my secretary, he had seen enough. I was not the one to call a state of emergency. The city was, the chief of police and the city, not the governor. Because as I say, they're in charge. But my secretary finally called me, and he talked to Colonel Flaherty, the head of chief of police. And listen, the chief and the superintendent, law enforcement likes to work together. He didn't want to jump above Charlottesville. But I give Brian credit. He said, screw protocol. And he called me and said, this is untenable. We can't keep it safe. I said, that's it. So at about 11:20, I declared a state of emergency. The city followed me. I sent the state police in, moved the Charlottesville back. We moved in, and they got on the megaphones and said, you have 11 minutes to empty the park out. Yeah. 11 minutes later, the park was totally cleared, and the National Guard went in and secured. So by 11:45, remember the rally was supposed to go from noon until 5. Before it had even kicked off, we canceled it. Yeah. Everything was fine, 0 property damage. We felt pretty good at this point. There had been some fights, and but no serious injuries at this point. Everything was fine. Hour later, as you know, James Field got in his car and ran through the crowd. So at that point, right about then, the president had come out and had so screwed it up on his messaging. I then flew down on another helicopter and flew down to Charlottesville to do the press conference. Yeah. And I remember it like it was 5 minutes ago. I'm in this little room about to go out, and there's thousands of press have converged on Charlottesville. The world is all wondering what is going on in this city. And just before, and I knew what I had to do. The president wouldn't say neo-Nazi. I knew I was going to do it. I had to do it. I didn't have any notes, but just before I walked out, the head of my security, EPU, came in and said, the helicopter has crashed, and Jay and Burke were killed. Yeah. And as I say, this had been 3.5 years into my term as governor. I was on the helicopter every day. Jay Cullen was my pilot. I would host the state police families at the governor's mansion every year for big dinners, and everybody would come with their kids. But Burke had been a member of my personal security detail, and then he became a pilot. This was like his 3rd week being a pilot. And Burke was a real character, folks. He was a real Irishman. I tell a couple stories in the books. My dog, I got elected governor. We moved from Northern Virginia down to Richmond. And Sally's first day of school, so here she is. She's going to be a freshman in high school, a new city. She doesn't know anybody. Her dad is governor. It's not a good first day of school for any kid. And so Burke is driver. Burke's, the children get security as well as myself and my wife. And so they're driving Sally to school in her big SUV, and she's just a wreck, and Burke's driving her, trying to calm her down. And she tells the story in the book. So it pulls up to St. Catherine's School, and all the seniors are out to welcome the new freshman. And as they pull up, she just wants to quietly, and Burke hits the siren and lights and gets on the megaphone, Sally McAuliffe has arrived. Totally, my daughter could have just, oh my gosh. And mortified her, she's a 16-year-old girl. The last time I saw Burke, which was really sad before he left me to go over to be a pilot trainer, to go on to become a pilot, he came over to my house and to the governor's mansion, and we had a good time, and he said, my son was deployed to Iraq at the time, and he's a Marine, as I mentioned earlier, and he said, I just sent Jack a great care package. I said, oh, Burke, that's nice. I said, what did you send Jack? Oh, we sent him a bunch of cigars, because my son had asked for that. You're over there way out in the middle of a desert in Iraq and not much to do at night but smoke cigars. There's no booze or anything else. So, and I sent him some nice magazines. And I said, great, like Newsweek, Time. He said, no, a little more colorful than that. I said, okay, fine. And then he said, I sent him some booze. I said, what? I said, you can't send booze to the military in a Muslim country. Oh, he said, don't worry about it. I put it in a Listerine bottle. So that is the last time I talked to Burke. And my son got the care package about 4 weeks later. I said, what'd you get? Oh, he said, I got some colorful magazines and a bunch of cigars. I said, did you get a Listerine bottle? He said, no, that didn't make it through the inspectors. I got a little note in my package that someone had tried to send me alcohol and to tell them not to do it again. But, I'm just saying, so it was hard for me because we had such a great relation. And I went out, as you all remember, and I said, white nationalists, neo-Nazis, go home, get the hell out of Virginia, get out of America. You think you're a bunch of patriots, you're a bunch of cowards. I did what the President of the United States should have done to send a message, you're not wanted here, and they weren't wanted here. And then, of course, I went up and saw the families after that night, and then Sunday went to the churches and all of that. But, you know, that's the main, and then I go into the last part of the book about where do we go from here.
Yeah. Well, so speaking of the families, you spoke with Susan Bro, Heather Heyer's mom, for the book. Tell us a little bit about that conversation and how you found her to be.
So Susan is a lot in the book. I reached out to her. I reached out to a lot of people. I also reached out to Karen Cullen, Lieutenant Jay Cullen's widow, and Amanda Bates, Burke Bates' widow. They just didn't want any part of it. We're very good friends. They just said, we just can't relive. It's just so hard for us. You know, they both had 2 young children. It was so hard for both those state trooper families. But I reached out to Susan, and, you know, she's a real dynamo. Yeah. And she, you know, I remember at the memorial service that her daughter died, but she didn't want her to die in vain, and she wanted her death to mean something and to keep fighting for social justice. And I love Susan, and she's through the book, and she's got a foundation going, and she's out trying to end hatred and racism and division in our country. And she is really something else, and she speaks all over the country. But it was, I mean, she tells in the book how she'd had dinner the night before with Susan, with Heather, with Susan, and she wasn't sure she was going to go to the rally. And then some of her friends called her, and she decided to go. And she remembers at the dinner that Heather gave her mother an extraordinarily long hug. And she just found that after, and then the horrible, she tells the story of someone called and a relative, you know, because Heather's phone was gone, and somebody picked up the phone, the brother called, and the woman answering the phone picked it up on the street of Charlottesville, you know, said, I don't know whose phone this is, but, you know, we got mayhem down here.
Yeah, just tragic.
Horrible.
Governor, I want to shift gears a little bit. We want to talk about the upcoming election. Many of us saw you last week on CNN, sitting with the team after the Democratic debates. You're a former head of the Democratic National Convention. First of all, what was your assessment of the debates?
Any one of those would be better than Donald Trump. I'll say that right at the top. And listen, folks, I'll be honest. I mean, I feel very, very comfortable. We're going to win the election. You know, some of you may not, but I mean, we're going to win in 2020 because remember in 2016 we lost 3 states: Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania by 77,000 votes. Just remember that number. And yet, the next day, everybody woke up and said, "Holy cow! How did this happen?" And 92 million people did not vote in 2016, 92 million. And we lost 3 states by 77,000 votes. People were outraged, then they got engaged. The first test in 17 was Virginia. Our House, Senate, governorship was up. We picked up the most seats in Virginia in 144 years. Yeah. There was passion and energy. The next year, 18, we won the House of Representatives. We netted 7 new governors. We picked up 8 state legislative chambers. My point is, many of those 92 million, it's not 92 million, but many of those folks who did not vote in 16 for whatever reason realize that their vote counts. Mm-hmm. And I can tell all of you in this room that the elections we had in 17, we had one House of Delegate race that was a tie, literally a tie out of like 18,000 votes. The winner, unfortunately, Democrat name, a Republican name, they picked it out of a bowl. So don't tell me your vote doesn't count. Yeah. It doesn't matter. So on the debates, a couple things I liked, some I didn't like. I don't like this, I'll be very honest with you, the idea that you're attacking Joe Biden on Barack Obama's proposals and policies. Are you kidding me? Barack Obama was a great president of the United States of America. He has a 95% approval rating, and you're attacking his proposal. I mean, really? When you got Trump over here, Looney Tunes, doing all the crazy stuff he's doing, and I didn't like that, so I've been very vocal on TV about that. Focus on Trump. Listen, they go after him on health care. There are 20 million more Americans today that have health care because of the ACA that wouldn't have it before. That's a good achievement. Now, can we fix it and make it better? Sure. But to throw it out the window and say it was bad, no.
Is the party going too far left, do you think? There has been that criticism. I don't like the left, right. I hate these labels. Are we going to be able to do Medicare for all and cover everybody? Are we going to be able to give everyone who comes in this country
health insurance? Are we going to be able to give everybody free college? Are we going to be able to wipe out all that college debt? I can tell you as a governor who has to deal, I mean, governors, no offense to senators in Congress, folks, no offense to them, they get to talk all day. I don't have a filibuster. As governor, I had to balance budgets. I had to build roads, I had to clean roads. We deliver the health care in our states. We run education in our states. Governors are CEOs. We actually get things done. I don't mean that disrespectfully to the House and the Senate. You could not pay me to be in the House and Senate, not my personality. But we got to focus. There's too much of us fighting up here about Medicare for all or Medicare for all for light. We need to cover 26 million people. That's all that's missing. 196 million Americans are covered today, okay? Let's retool the Medicare eligibility requirements, and we can cover everybody. But it was mind-numbing to watch the debate the other day. I have no idea where the Democratic Party stands on health care. It's our issue. Trump has ruined it by getting rid of the individual mandate. Focus on what you care about every day. You go to a pharmacy. Your prescription drug costs are too high. Tell me how you're going to reduce prescription drug costs. You go to a hospital, you get a $2,000 bill for an out-of-network anesthesiologist. That is what the American public care about. Yeah. So focus on those issues and start talking about it. Not that I'm passionate about the topic, but I mean, honestly, though, we're going to win this thing, but talk about what voters want us to talk about, and we're up here yelling about all this stuff and attacking. And as I said in the Post yesterday, there was no joyful warriors. We got a lot to be proud of, and, we should act like that. Yeah. But don't attack our own.
How about Joe Biden? He is a friend of yours. He's somebody that you've known a long time.
40 years, yeah.
Yeah, there has been some criticism. I mean, he's been the front runner, and then there were those who felt that his performance was not great, better the second time than the first. What about Joe Biden? Do you anticipate that he will become the nominee, or what do you think about him?
Well, he didn't have a good first debate. I'm not telling you anything in this room that any of you don't know. His second debate was better. He had, 8 candidates attack him? I mean, but, you're the front runner. That's part of the game. People are looking to see, can you handle these attacks? Because Donald Trump in the debates is going to have a lot of attacks. And he's going to lie and do whatever he does. He just went over 10,000 lies yesterday. I don't know if you track the Washington Post. They track every one of them. Go online. They have every single doozer in there. It's pretty interesting. So, I mean, what they want to see is that Biden can handle these kind of attacks and he can fight back.
And can he?
He can. He can. I think he was shocked in the first debate. I think when Kamala Harris went after him on race, and she said, Joe, I know you're not a racist. It's like, Joe, I know you're not a child molester. It's like just saying it was so shocking to Joe Biden. And I think it just pushed him back. And he had a hard time recovering from that. How do I come back? She's a woman, African-American woman. How do I come back? And I think at the end of the day, talk about, the things you got done. I mean, that's the smart thing to do. So he's still the front runner by far. I mean, he's leading in most of the states. I think Warren has a really top-shelf operation in Iowa. I thought Elizabeth Warren was very good in the debates. I think she's got a plan out. I like it when people have plans. I may not agree with everything in the plan, and people don't agree with me or everything, but I do like it that she's out there with a plan and she's talking about what she's doing. So listen, the top tier is Joe Biden, and you've got Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, Kamala, and then you've got probably Pete Buttigieg there, and then you've got probably Cory Booker. A lot are going to get out soon. I mean, the next debate, you've got to have 130,000 donors and 2%. So we'll probably lose about 10 candidates coming up. And, but folks, we're what, 5 months away from voting start. I mean, we're going to early vote in January. You can now, in California, vote 6 weeks early. So the voting, people say, oh, it's a long way off. It's not a long way off. Yeah. It's going to come pretty fast. Yeah.
So there was a lot of talk about you running for president for a while, and then you decided not to run. Why not?
Well, I wanted to, and I spent last year traveling to 25 states. Listen, I was a Southern governor, born in New York. I inherited a huge deficit. I turned it into the largest surplus in the history of the state. I led on socially progressive issues. As most of you probably know, I restored more felon rights than any governor in the history of the United States of America. I was sued twice by the Republicans, sued for contempt of court, reformed my criminal justice system, put the biggest investment ever in K-12 education, did all the health care, gave pregnant women health care, dental care for the first time for many of them. So I was a very progressive governor, the most progressive in the history of Virginia. But also, I'm very, I always consider myself a fiscally conservative, pro-business Democrat. I created a record amount of jobs and economic activity. I thought that was a great message. They go hand in hand, they work together, because as Adam knows, when I took office, our state was back, we were in tough shape. We had sequestration. Virginia is the #1 state for defense spending. We have the largest naval base in the world, Norfolk. We have 27 military installations, the Pentagon, CIA, Quantico, all in Virginia. And sequestration just really knocked us on our heels. And in fairness, the Republicans had taken our state. When I ran for office, folks, I had to break a 44-year trend to win. All statewide were Republicans. I only had 32 Democrats in my House of delegates. When I won, we took over. And when I left office, we had the biggest gains. I say 140 years, we controlled everything. I took a red state and made it a blue state. But I had to stop all the socially divisive. If you all remember Virginia in 2013, we passed the transvaginal bill. You remember that doozer? We became a laughingstock on national television, Rachel Maddow and Jon Stewart. And we passed the trap laws to shut all 25 women's clinics down. This all happened right before I took office. I ended all of that. I vetoed it. I fired the Board of Health. Every women's clinic stayed open. Actually, we opened a couple more. I was the first governor to perform a gay marriage in the United States of America after the Supreme Court. As Adam will tell you, this is Virginia. I'm not talking California or New York. I had heads spinning. But I finally convinced my Republicans to stop this insanity. When I ran for governor, I did something no one's ever done before. I was the first candidate or state official in the South to come out for marriage equality. I told the women I'd be a brick wall. I'm the first candidate for governor and the Democratic nominee to have an F rating from the NRA. And I was proud of it. I ran television commercials on it. And I touted it all the time. But how I was able to change my legislature, Republicans, and I remember I went out to see one of the biggest companies in the world, the CEO. I won't mention his name, but it might be a fruit that you eat. And it was $1.6 billion investment they were going to make. And I went out, and the first question the CEO asked me is, Governor, why do you have an HB2 anti-gay bill? And I said, well, the Republican legislature, I have a crazy Republican introduced it, but don't worry, they can't override my veto. And I ended up getting the project, but I came back and I met with my Republican leadership. And I said, folks, you think this is really neat, introducing these bills, these social bills, divisive bills. I said, you're killing my ability to create jobs. And you got to stop it. And I was successful. We just won the Amazon bid. We won Google, Facebook, Microsoft, Salesforce. Nestle, I recruited out of LA to move to Virginia. CoStar, I got them all to come to Virginia because we were open and welcoming. We treated everybody with dignity and respect, no matter whom you love, the color of your skin, it didn't matter. And my economy, by the time I left office, was the envy of the country. We were humming. I took unemployment from 5.4 all the way down to 3.6. Rated the best state to do business in the United States of America. I got, shockingly, Public Official of the Year in the United States of America. I just try to bring practical, pragmatic. So I thought this would work. It's a long answer to your question. But, Biden was going to run, and he and I were in similar spaces. But more importantly, we have the House and Senate elections up in Virginia. So did I get in with 25 other candidates with a very narrow path, or do I come home to Virginia? We had a problem in Virginia. You all know this year. We had our governor with blackface, our lieutenant governor with 2 allegations of rape, and our attorney general with blackface. This all happened in 72 hours. So I decided I was going to go home, and I've taken charge of the elections. And I've done 58 events in the last 5 weeks. And so you got to go where you can make the biggest difference in life.
So there's some
And
rumblings.
I'm young. Who knows, Tracey, what could happen? Look at me.
Well, there's rumblings about you running for governor again. Is that a possibility?
It's a possibility. I don't like to think too far in the future. If I did, I'd be the first Democrat in 400 years to win twice. I'll be honest with you, folks. I love being governor. It is a great job because you can use executive authority to help people's lives. I restored the felon rights. You know, I did that through executive authority. I took the Confederate flag off of the license plates in Virginia. I did that with executive authority. So, you know, I couldn't get it through my legislature, but boy, I tell you, I love that pen.
Yeah.
Boom, 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 boom.
So,
Now,
Governor, I have a couple of quick things
Yeah.
I want to get to before we get to some
Yeah.
questions that I have from our
We're here
audience.
to what, midnight?
But we probably could be.
Man,
we
let's
have a lot
get
of
the
questions
kegerator out
for
if we're
you.
going to do that.
But let me ask you just two things very quickly before I
Sure.
get to questions from our audience. One is, you urge your readers to do something. Having read your book and laid out sort of all of the events of Charlottesville, you urge the reader to do something. What are some practical things that people can do if they want to take a stand against white
Yeah,
nationalism?
good question. So if you read the book, as bad as Charlottesville was, there was one benefit to it, folks. It ripped off the scab on racism. I think for far too long in our country, people felt that the issues of racism had been dealt with, and we didn't have racism. It's a hard topic. White people don't like to talk about it, but it existed in our society, and Charlottesville really brought it to the fore. And I talk about in the book, and John Lewis, Congressman Lewis, the civil rights legend, he writes the foreword in the book, and then he and I collaborate on the last chapter. I mean, John Lewis called me Monday after Charlottesville and said, "Governor, I watched your speech and I started to cry." And I thought, my goodness, John Lewis, with everything you have been through. And so he worked with me on the book, and we talk about where do we go from here. And folks, there's going to be racism in this country until we stop the inequality in schools. Children get different quality education. I can't speak to Philadelphia, but I can speak to Virginia. I can speak to Richmond, Virginia. I can speak to Petersburg, Virginia, Norfolk, Virginia. I put a lot of money in. You know why? Because in many of these African-American areas, they have schools that the heating doesn't work sometimes, the cooling doesn't work. If it rains, water comes through. It's not the same quality teacher. That is racism. And if every child is not given the best quality education early, then you're going to have these problems. We have racism on housing. We have it on issues of health care. But one thing that really bothered me was in our criminal justice system. So I reformed it in Virginia. You know, we're a southern state. You know, I talked about restoration of rights. 40 states, it's automatic. You do your time, you get the right to vote back. Virginia was one of two states that permanently disenfranchised you for the rest of your life, forever. And if you commit a felony in Virginia, you know what a felony is? $200. So if you steal $201, you are a felon, and you will never vote again for the rest of your life. That's the law in Virginia, folks. It actually started in 1902 when a state senator by the name of Glass put it in our Constitution and said that day, quote, "I'm doing this to eliminate the darky from being a political factor in Virginia." That was his quote in our capital. 114 years later, new sheriff in town, and I was able to eliminate that. But, you know, sentencing, unfair system on sentencing, I'll tell you an example. Walking out the door, I also had the most pardons, no surprise, of any governor in Virginia history. I pardoned a guy named Lenny Singleton. Lenny Singleton was a drug addict. Lenny Singleton committed 5 robberies. He was trying to get money to buy drugs. 5 robberies. The most he stole collectively was $535. And nobody was ever injured. So he stole $535. Guess what his sentence was in Virginia? Take a guess. For $535.
Yeah, decades, probably.
2 life sentences plus 130 years.
Wow.
Now, I could sit here for an hour and tell you about what the pardons I had to do. Now, I pardoned him, but he'd served 2 decades in prison for $535. My point is, what the book's telling you to do is you got to get out there and do something. Too many politicians talk. So I leaned in, as all the stories I've told you. I loved leaning in. But too many politicians today don't. So you got to vote, first of all. Those 92 million of you, any of you in this room didn't vote. You got to vote, and then you got to hold politicians accountable. And you want politicians to fight on housing and education. We can fix this, but we've got to have education earlier. You were not born this way. You were not born to say the things that I heard in Charlottesville that day. You were not born that way, to say you're going to burn someone to death. So it's school, K through 6th grade, we better have discussions about how we deal with one another and how we love one another, how we interact. This idea that somehow some race is more superior to another race, really? And I always like to say with Donald Trump, unless you're Native American, which he always likes to make fun of, you came from somewhere else, folks. Yeah. And guess what? 1607, those first 3 ships, the Constant, the Discovery, and the Godspeed, where'd they come? Jamestown, Virginia. Now, anyone here from Massachusetts? I am so angry at you people. You do that Plymouth Rock bull at Thanksgiving? That was 1620. 1607, we were 12 years earlier. And this month, August of this year, marks the 400th anniversary of the first slaves brought to America. And they were brought to Virginia from Ghana. So my point is, lean in, do stuff. Yeah. Too many politicians, they put their finger up in the air. Whether you like what I say or you don't, and my Republicans always learn this, you always knew where I was coming from, whether you liked it or not. And stand for it. If I ran for office, I said I did a lot of things no one had done before. And if I lost, I'm okay. My life will go on. But I'm not going to change my values and who I am in order to win an election, nor should you do it to stay in office. Fight. And that's what we got to do.
Well, on that note.
Thank you.
Some questions from our audience for you. Who do you think would be the ticket with the best chance of defeating Trump?
Wow. You really are putting me in a bad position here.
No pressure.
I'm now a CNN commentator. I'm supposed to be neutral. Listen, let me just tell you what the polling data shows today. Today, Joe Biden, the polls, crushes Donald Trump. Over the weekend, a poll came out. He's winning Ohio by 8 points. He's winning Texas by 6. He's winning North Carolina by 12. If that's the case, it's an electoral college blowout. And I will say this, but, listen, he's got to go through a lot.
Yeah, it's early, right?
The days of 2 white men on the ticket are over. And in fairness, rightfully so. Women, make up 54, 56% of our vote every damn election. So why do we keep putting these white men up? It is time that we're going to have a woman on the ticket, which I think is great.
So you're thinking Biden, fill in the blank.
Well, it's Biden, Kamala. I don't know anything, but I think he was pretty angry with her after that one debate. Warren would be in the mix. Amy Klobuchar would be in the mix. So, you want to look at the map and see who could probably, who could, if something happened to you, could step into the job. That's the most important. But also who could electorally. I could also make an argument for Amy Klobuchar would help you in the Midwest. I think she'd be great. Kamala, African-American, there you go. There's some Amy Klobuchars there. And I think Warren would excite a lot of people in the base. There we go, good. The key is being able to track those votes in the middle and firing up your base. That is how you win. You got to keep both going. And that's why I just don't want us all to destroy each other through this primary process.
Yeah. This question says, and forgive me, you pointed out after the first Democratic debate in Miami that no one mentioned infrastructure or workforce training, yet these would help people in everyday life and possibly have bipartisan support. Why the emphasis in both parties on abstractions?
Good question. And I was very public, you always know where I'm coming from, folks. But after the debates, we'd had this long debate about people could come into the country. There would be no criminal charges, and it'd be under the civil code. That was a long debate. And then we went into this whole debate, and they asked, would you want to give everybody who comes in the country health care? And everybody put their hands up. And my thought was, I probably wouldn't have put my hand up. You want to take care of everybody. But if you're sitting home in America, you're saying, wait a minute now. I pay for my health care, and everybody's going to get it for free? What is this all about? So my point is, don't get caught over here. And every time we play on immigration, we're playing on Trump's battlefield. Where do we lead as Democrats? People trust us on health care. They trust us on these, kitchen table issues that they think about when they go to bed at 3 o'clock in the morning. And the debates have been over here, and I get it. The networks are trying, they want friction and so forth, but I want to hear about infrastructure. I want to hear about K-12 funding. It's not being brought up yet. I want to talk about teacher pay. We still don't pay our teachers enough in this country, and we wonder we have such a shortage and dearth of teachers in America. Folks, we're in a crisis. I think I'm down 2,800 teachers in Virginia. I did a thing when I was governor. I wrote a letter to every retired teacher and said, come back. Don't worry, it won't affect your retirement. Actually, I'll turbocharge your retirement. Come, I need you. Yeah. That's what's going on. I didn't hear anything about cybersecurity. Russia is still as busy as they've ever been, folks. And I haven't heard anything, which I'm big on, workforce development. Our education system was built for the Industrial Revolution. It's a different economy. As governor, I made Virginia the #1 state for cybersecurity, data analytics, unmanned systems. I had created so many new cyber jobs. I had 48,000 openings when I left office. Starting pay was $88,000. Starting pay, and you don't need a 4-year degree, you need a 2-year, probably community college degree. So what did I do? Every one of my community colleges, I made them centers of excellence for cybersecurity, so they now teach cybersecurity. We've got to find out what employers want in their workforce, change our education system, do workforce development, do credentials, and, you know, I did the most credentials of any state. I did the first thing called a Workforce Performance Development Grant. If you go, I ended up having 166 credentials I needed, different categories. If you went and got one of them, we'll pay for that. But goodness gracious, one of the last events I did, oh, it was great. It was down in Wakefield, Virginia, Southern Virginia, really a hard-hit area. We used to be textile and tobacco gone. I need power line workers. So we did one of the credentials, and I went to the graduation, 19 young men, 17, 18 years old. I went there and gave them their credential. Every kid walked across that stage. Not one of them ever was going to go to college. They went through our 8-week training program. Everyone walked, I gave them the credential. Every one of those young men started the next day with a job that paid $72,000. Wow. That's what we have to start doing in our education system. Yeah. Because I don't know about you, I love going to college. I had a great time. Back then you could drink when you were 18, which meant we were drinking at 16. Whatever, I'm teasing. But, you know, I mean, I was a poli-sci major. Don't take it the wrong way, but we're spending all of this money on a degree that gets you no skills other than drinking. And we got all these we have 9 million job openings in America today, but we don't have the skilled workers to meet the jobs. And these are good jobs. I'm telling you, I can hire every single, I've got huge ironwork factories down there because of all my defense industry. I can hire a welder. Anyone here wanted to go get a welding degree, you would start in Virginia tomorrow at probably $75,000. I can do this all. My point is we got to come on down, I'll get you there. And you know what? It's one of my credentialed things. I'll pay for you. Oh, Virginia's for lovers. You'll love it.
And welders.
And listen to me. Are you married? Ho, ho. You are my prime candidate. I got 352 wineries. I got 278 craft breweries. I got 8 varieties of oysters. You come to Virginia, eat the oysters, you drink the wine. Virginia's for lovers. You figure out the next step. I can't do everything for you, but I can get you halfway there.
That's a good running start, right?
Yeah, you're in.
We'll end with this question. What should the next What should the next president do to heal our nation?
Whew. Well, good question. What should the next president do? Beat Donald Trump. And folks, I don't say this lightly, but it is the rhetoric every single day. We've just gone through the squad, Elijah Cummings calling, you know, Baltimore rat infested. I mean, who does this? I mean, honestly, the things he has said and the constant attacks on people. You're supposed to be bringing people together. And that's going to be a big challenge for the next president. But I think it'll be pretty easy. I mean, all our other presidents have, you know, as I say, you know, in big moments when things have happened, they bring people together. People want us to be brought together. And let me be clear. 1,000 of these people who came to Charlottesville, we are a nation of 335 million people. Don't ever let these 1,000 define who we are. And that's what I told folks in Virginia. They came from 35 states. This is not who we are. They're going to be haters. You know, deal with it. But, you know, you got to move on. So the next president, we've got big challenges. I mean, if Donald Trump had come in office, and I was chairman of the national governors, so I was in charge of all the governors. I had to work with him a lot. If he had come in and done infrastructure, not done that horrible tax cut that no one in this room benefited from, and used that $2 trillion on infrastructure, we would have created hundreds of thousands of new jobs, worked on the ACA and fixed it, because it needed to be tweaked and done and moved, fixed health care, done infrastructure, stayed off of his tweeting and all that insanity. This guy would be unbeatable today. He would be, because the way the economy is. But he is so alienated with his statements. And you know, maybe his strategy is, there are a lot of neo-Nazis and white supremacists who I did not motivate in 16, and I'm going to get them to come out. I don't believe that's the case. But what he has done, independent women have left in droves. Non-college educated women have left him in droves. They're literally, folks, and you hold me to it, unless we really screw this up, there is really no chance he can win again. He can't get above 42% in any poll. Now, let's keep third-party candidates out. I don't want to see another Jill Stein running, just as I didn't like Ralph Nader, who cost Al Gore the election. I mean, think of that. New Hampshire and Florida. Jill Stein took enough votes from us here in Wisconsin and Michigan to cost, what is this all about? Yeah. And then she was over a picture having dinner with Putin. Really? With Michael Flynn? What was that all about? But whatever, I won't go into that. But the next president, huge opportunity to bring us together, but you know, people got to get out and vote. And what you'll find in the book, I talk obviously a lot about issues. The last part of the book, which I worked with John Lewis on, where we need to go as a nation. folks, we are the greatest nation on earth. I don't like this continually rundown of our country. It is. I was a kid who started his first business at 14. My folks weren't going to send me to college to pay for it. I had to do it. I started my first business at 14, became a successful company. I started 30 businesses. I was the youngest bank chairman in American history. You know.
Only in America, right?
Only in
America.
America.
Yeah.
You know, I did it myself. I've never worked for anyone in my life. I have had ups. I've had huge successes. I've had huge failures. This is part of life. I'm an entrepreneur. I love it. I put my risk online every single day. I love that. Only in America we can do this, but we can only do it if we're working together and we're unified and we're treating everybody with dignity and respect, and that's the message in the book.
Governor Terry McAuliffe,
Thank you.
thank you so much for being with us.